Welcome to the Legit Football NFL podcast. Brian McFadden here, co-founder of Legit Football. We are coming to you live on a Saturday. I think for the first time, not sure if we've ever broadcast on a Saturday before, but that's what we do in June. We mix things up because there's only so much news to go around. We've got to change things up. And it's also to accommodate my partner in crime, Kevin Phillip Fox, who's all the way en Paris, en France. Kevin,
What up?
obviously it's great. We have been doing the 30 minutes together, but this is the first time doing the Legit Football pod together in a hot minute.
Dude, we're back, man. It just feels right. This is what we've been waiting for a long time. The 30 minutes was a nice tease. You know, it's the hors d'oeuvres, if you will, the lead up, but we're here, baby. This is the entree and we're ready to attack it, man. France is awesome. I'll probably speak some French a little bit today in the episode. But you know, I'm saving that. You know, I'm saving that for the moments where
magnifique.
Très magnifique.
Très magnifique. Armand, our number one, already out in the chat at dinner with friends, and he's like, "I'm still gonna pop."
Still here.
Pod. He is the goat.
The goat.
Far and away. No
Absolutely.
issues. It's not just you and me, Kevin. This is, and just so everybody knows, I am not back on the Legit Football pod regularly. I had a week where I could step in while Kevin was in Paris, and then it turns out Kevin could also do it. So we're like, let's bring the whole band together. So let's bring in Adrian Ravito from Australia. Now it's a party.
What is happening, boys? I was feeling great until you had to point out that you're not back for a minute. I was living in a world where it was the three of us again, and it felt good. It felt good,
you know,
man.
Let's stay in that world, Adrian. We don't have to think about tomorrow. It's a weekend for all of us. This is the first time. Normally, we broadcast on Fridays. It's Saturday for Adrian, but it's Saturday for us. I think it's technically Sunday for Kevin now. And Adrian is like well into Sunday morning at this point. So
that's crazy.
Let's get this party started. I don't
We're crossing time zones. We're crossing time zones. It's no biggie.
So
no biggie.
Love it.
Fun main topic. If you happen to catch the show from Monday, we did Legit NFC, where Adrian and I spent 2 minutes with a timer on all 16 NFC teams. We're going to do the same thing for the AFC, except it'll be the three of us with Kevin. We've divvied up the teams accordingly. We've got our producer, Anthony Wayner, behind the scenes, running the sound, running the videos, and running that timer. No Lions for him to chime in, and so it's just going to be the three of us splitting up those 16 teams. I haven't even I'm off, you know, my normal routine with this. I haven't even checked if there's legit headlines to go over.
Oh, that's the best. Well, that's actually great, Brian, because it gives me a chance to jump in really quick and address. So I've been listening to Legit Football the entire time that I've been gone. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Anthony is jumping the gun on me. I respect it. Anthony's gotten really good at playing me and Adrian wrap up music. That's one of Anthony's strengths now. He's basically just an Oscars producer at this point.
He gives you the cue. He gives you the audio.
He gives us wrap up music.
Yep. I mean, if the NFC show is nothing to go by, but like you see what my timing is like. I was over the time on every team. So
me and Brian each have 2 minutes. Adrian has 3 because
we make accommodations here.
But I wanted to address a couple of things. First and foremost, I'm so happy we're having the Sam Howell love party on Legit Football right now. He absolutely deserves it. It's very, very real possibility that Sam Howell is a good quarterback and the Commanders make the playoffs. You know, I heard, what else did I hear? I heard some Jimmy slander. Don't appreciate that. You guys know that.
We have the AFC coming up. There may be some more Jimmy slander in your near future.
You know, it's a little more warranted now than it used to be with all the crazy offseason that Jimmy's had. Last but not least, I'm sorry about Tyreek Hill, man. I don't want anything external other than football to have anything to do with why the Dolphins don't win the AFC East. So, you know, I hate to see that. Yeah, I would hate for it to be Tyreek. I'd hate for it to be Tua. Let it be just Buffalo's better. That's what I'm hoping for. So anyways, had to get those things off my chest. Adrian, you're such a homer, man. You love your Packers, man. You love Jordan Love, man.
I'm always gonna.
You love your Bills. I mean, it's like we all.
But one of us is right, though. But one of us is reasonable.
Oh,
right?
Wow. Okay. I will say one last thing before we jump into our legit headlines. I mentioned this before we started recording, Kevin. I am, at least for today, unshaven. In memory to both of you fine gentlemen, I needed to be part of the facial hair gang
bearded
here,
comrades.
but especially for Kevin, who is enjoying his time overseas. All right, so second cue, Anthony. Let's bring up those. Let's start in right here in the Bay Area with the 49ers. Sam Darnold, quote, has the edge going into camp over Trey Lance. Real quick, this is not a surprise to me. Just throwing that out there. Details: Adam Schefter told the Pat McAfee Show. A lot of good juicy tidbits from Schefter's recently appearance on the McAfee Show. Said that Darnold appears to be ahead of Lance on the depth chart and will have an opportunity to, quote, shine come training camp. Schefter also said the 49ers signing of Darnold on the first day of free agency signaled how highly they regard his upside. Separately, when asked about the possibility of trading Trey Lance, Schefter said the third-year quarterback has, quote, no trade market. And lastly, Brock Purdy, important update here. Schefter made clear that Purdy will start once medically cleared. The team is, quote, optimistic he'll be ready for week 1. We've heard multiple reports that seems to be the case. Kevin, I'll start with you on this. Is this a surprise? How did you feel about the whole Lance Purdy situation and with Darnold thrown in?
I would say this is absolutely a surprise, mostly on the front of the Darnold love. We've seen a pretty big sample size of Sam Darnold in the NFL, and he has not been who he was drafted to be, or even really remotely close. And now Sam Darnold is being touted as already better than Trey Lance, who we've got virtually no sample size of. I just feel like the Trey Lance slander, the Trey Lance slide from grace is just so, I don't want to say exaggerated because it's very clearly real. Like there's a very clearly real drumbeat from San Francisco that Trey Lance isn't the guy, but it's like, what, like we thought that about Justin Fields. I thought Justin Fields played some of the worst football I ever saw in my life in his first couple starts in Chicago last year. And this man is now one of my breakout candidates, one of the hottest names in the offseason. So I think the Trey Lance disrespect has gone a bit too far, especially to put, Mr. Pac-Man seeing ghosts himself ahead of Trey Lance on the depth chart without even a real competition. I don't know.
There's a couple key points to remember here, Kevin. One, Sam Darnold has never played in a Shanahan offense. Arguably the most quarterback-friendly offense in the NFL, right? Number two, nobody has seen more of Trey Lance than the San Francisco 49ers. And the reports that we've gotten out of camp from the beat reporters who only get to see limited practice, we had a few stories in Legit Football last offseason about how inaccurate he was and that he was in camp, which is when you're supposed to shine and all the hype's coming out. In camp, he finished with a 50% completion percentage.
Yeah, it's
not a physical. I know you love your traits, guys, Kevin. It's not a physical thing, but there's something about what the Niners are seeing with Trey Lance and how he runs that offense and how he's just not up to par. You bring in a guy in Sam Darnold who had the possibility to go number 1 overall. Lance might have gone number 3, but nobody was really expecting him to go 1 overall. Darnold had a much higher pedigree, a lot more starting experience at USC, certainly than Lance had in his entire career, high school and college. Yeah. So I've bought into the Brock Purdy hype from the beginning because I saw how well he ran that offense.
Same.
You don't need to be a superstar. You need to be accurate, decisive, go through your progressions quickly because the Shanahan offense is going to get receivers open. Something about what Lance is doing that we're not seeing behind the scenes, I think is what's causing this news, Adrian.
Yeah, and look, Sam Darnold, I mean, there was a lot of, you're right, he was like a highly touted prospect. He walked into offenses or walked into situations that were really, really poor for him. We all remember Adam Gase.
Do we need to say anything else?
Yeah. So, like, I'm actually quite excited to see him get a real shot. And shout out to Armand's Jets. Like, he got a rough go there. He went to Carolina. The offensive line was terrible, and now he's going to be in a Shanahan offense, as you mentioned, super quarterback friendly. We can see if he is who he was promised to be ever. Trey Lance, I agree with you 100%. The sample size is small, but when Brock Purdy came in and ran the offense better than he did on a whim's notice, it's saying something about Trey Lance and Jimmy for that moment. I'm just going to throw some more Jimmy shade your way, but so I'm excited to see Darnold. I'm right with you. I'm all on the hype for the Brock Purdy train. I hope he comes back week 1. I really want to see a full season with him. But yeah, interested to see Darnold in a good situation.
Yeah, and I like Brock Purdy as much as the next guy. I think he's definitely the deserved starter, no question. I'm glad to see that that's finally, they've taken away the mystery behind that. And yeah, the Darnold thing, I mean, he had a shot to run an offense in Carolina, didn't he? And wasn't he like super studly the first 3 weeks of the season? And then I don't know.
It was a Matt Rule run offense. And where's Matt Rule now? Not in the NFL.
I'm not super anti-Darnold, but like I don't think definitively right now, if I'm like an NFL GM, I mean, they see more than we see, but I'm not sure if I'm definitively higher on Darnold than I would be on Lance. I just think we need a bigger sample size with Trey Lance.
Yeah.
But I agree, we haven't seen it. But the fact that it seems from inside the organization that they're putting Darnold ahead of a guy that they've had in their offseason for the last 2 seasons already speaks volumes. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm trusting what the Niners are deciding from the quarterback position.
Yeah,
Let's go to see. I'm on the show. I'm going to try to keep it tight. Go ahead.
I love it.
I love it.
My last point is that particularly for the haul they gave up for him, that would be seen as like one of the worst
Right.
trade or some of the worst draft picks, not in history, but right up there. Had they not got Brock Purdy and someone to succeed,
Right.
So the fact that they're willing to sort of put him number 3 after that says a lot about what they think of him. I'll shut up now.
Sunk cost fallacy, right?
I'm actually going to add on to that really quickly. Number one, they were on the brink of the Super Bowl last year, so they don't care about the draft capital.
Right.
Kyle Shanahan doesn't care about the draft capital.
No,
And
sunk
number
cost
two,
fallacy.
lots of reports have come out who at the time people were questioning, but it seems like Shanahan wanted Mac Jones. And that they actually ended up switching to Trey Lance. They did not trade up at 3 to get Trey Lance. They traded up at 3 to get Jones, did their due diligence, and ended up picking Lance. So that's an important factor here. Let's go to New Orleans, where Chris Olave is, quote, headed toward a big season. Catherine Terrell, who covers the Saints for ESPN, noted that Olave looked fantastic in offseason workouts. I've actually seen and heard a lot of great things about Olave. We've mentioned him multiple times in Legit Football. Second-year wideout has developed a strong connection with Kevin's boy, Derek Carr.
Love him.
In one particular minicap session, Carr hit Olave for a deep touchdown on the first play of 11-on-11 drills. Last year, Olave caught 72 of 119 targets for 1,042 yards and 4 touchdowns across 15 games with Andy Dalton at quarterback. We've mentioned before, and actually we had a tweet out a couple weeks ago of just how big of a statistical difference, metrics difference is going from Dalton to Carr. Is Adrian, are we buying the Olave hype?
I was in on it. Actually, I got to go back to before the draft. I was in on Olave pre-draft. I thought he was like a really top prospect. He's come in, 82.5 PFF score, 1,000 yards on 15 games. He's getting a quarterback now. Objectively, like you said, statistically he's better, and objectively he's got a much higher ceiling than Andy Dalton. I know Derek Carr's probably not the man he used to be, but I feel like Olave was already getting Rookie of the Year votes last year, a couple of them. I feel like he's really going to break out this season, and I feel like he's going to be talked about in that sort of, I'm going to say top 5 to 7, because I feel like he's really going to show his true colors this year.
I think at least the top 20 minimum, maybe he's inching into the top 15.
Am I being too nice?
There's just a lot of great wide receivers.
Yeah.
It's not a knock on Olave as much as it is. We know when Kevin put out his top wide receiver rankings, got roasted for some people who were not included in there.
By the way.
That's that French internet. For once, it's not the problem.
Edge of our seats, wanting to know what the by the way is. Oh, he's back.
Oh, okay. Am I back? I got lost for a second. Adrian agrees with me that Tyreek Hill is not a top 5 wide receiver.
Well,
sorry,
like
Brian.
I said before, Adrian's a Homer Packers fan who's delusional, so I'm not going to say
Christian Watson's better, whatever.
Oh, cheap shot, man. Cheap shot. Christian Watson.
I'm not on the Legit Football pod much anymore. I got to get my shots in.
You got to get
your
your
shots
in.
How's McFadden? The Dolphins are like relevant for the first time in years, and he's all over it.
I'm going to ride that wave until Tyreek Hill jumps in the water and his agent wrestles a shark and he punches a guy. That
Yeah.
So anyway,
let's go over.
Let's go over to New England. Patriots rookie Christian Gonzalez, who they got a bit of a steal. I think they ended up getting him at 15 or 16 in the draft. A lot of people were pegging him as like a top 7, top 8 pick. Was the top cornerback at OTAs and minicamp. Albert Breer heard that Gonzalez was the Patriots' quote best corner during OTAs. The first rounders already working with the starting defense. Mike Reese and Chad Graff have also commented on Gonzalez's success, and a little bit of a spoiler because I've been covering the Patriots for our Legit AFC. This was already a really good Patriots defense. They finished top 5 DVOA of the last 9 weeks of the regular season. And the fact that Gonzalez is already at the top of the pecking order for defensive backs, the rich get richer here, Kevin.
Yeah, and we all were kind of saying on draft day that was a crazy slide, and that the league screwed up letting him go to New England. I
felt like such a Patriots move, like just maneuver the board, and the guy you want just falls into your lap.
It's just so shrewd, and it's great for them because I think they're going to have to win with defense, based on what we talked about and what we will talk about with their offense. But Christian Gonzalez is a stud. He's a great player, and I think he's going to be locking receivers down, a la Sauce Gardner. He's just another one of those absolutely dominant corners in the AFC East, which just, Brian, that's not great for us.
He had if you guys have seen on the videos on Twitter, he had a one-handed interception at OTAs, and it looks amazing. Now I know that's just one catch. I know that doesn't make him a great corner. But in 2022 season, in his college days, he sort of broke out, and we all agreed that was such a of course the Patriots get someone like that. I can't remember whatever pick it was. It was ridiculous that they got him, and yeah, it's look, it's scary for you AFC boys, that's for sure.
Yeah,
I'll say this much. One of the reasons he slid is Kevin loves his traits in quarterback. He is a traitsy cornerback, and actually his tape and some of his PFF grades from college are not as steady as, like, say, a Devin Witherspoon, right? So there is some question about whether he'll be able to keep up consistent technical play that's required for the secondary position, but physically he's extremely gifted. He's long, he's quick, got great ball skills. We'll have to see if he's able to actually put it together in his rookie season. Let's finish up in Buffalo, where James Cook has referred to himself, rightfully so, as RB1. When asked by none other than Rich Eisen what his role would be in the upcoming season, he replied, obviously RB1. He went on to say that his goal was to be an all-pro or Pro Bowler. Bills selected Cook in the second round of last year's draft and across 16 games. None of those starts because he was behind Singletary. Totaled 687 scrimmage yards, including 507 rushing and 180 receiving, and 3 touchdowns on 110 touches. Did have a 5.7 yard per carry average, which ranked first among running backs with at least 85 rush attempts. Kevin, I got to let you start with this one because it is in Orchard Park.
Yeah, man. I was messaging with Joe, one of our fearless leaders at Legit Football, because he's buying in. He was messaging me saying, I think James Cook's stock is through the moon. And I think just follow the transactions, really, more than anything. They drafted him in the second round. They did not retain Devin Singletary. They traded away Zach Moss. They restructured Nyheim Hines' contract. This team, every single arrow is pointing to James Cook to the moon. They have great complementary backs. I think Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, Hines, I think they'll all sprinkle in nicely and sort of take some of the pressure off of James Cook, Baby Cook, as I like to refer to him. But I think Baby Cook, we saw that explosion on those touchdowns. He had a couple long ones. He had a long one against Chicago, a long one against Pittsburgh. He had a nice touchdown reception against New England. He looked good in the playoffs. I think, Brian, he may have scored in the wild card round against Miami.
I don't remember that game.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. But I think what we're seeing is the sample size was, we mentioned, you said 110 touches. You extrapolate that over, maybe 200, 250. I think you got yourself a really, really solid fantasy asset and a very potential Pro Bowl caliber player.
Adrian, the big question I have, and a lot of people have with Cook, is he's 190 pounds. They brought on Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, I think clearly because they knew they needed a more physical running style, maybe short yardage, goal line. So there's at least a little bit of a hint, Kevin. You brought all the great things about why they believe in him, and I do think you're right there. But I think they believe him maybe not as a 3-down back because they want a guy who is not 190 pounds to kind of knock those short yardage. Adrian, how are you feeling about James Cook?
Yeah, look, I'm with Kevin that you follow the breadcrumbs of what the team do. And of course, it kind of speaks to that they believe in him. But you're right. They probably need a big physical back. There was talk of them getting Derrick Henry. There was talk of Dalvin Cook, the brothers. But that'd be amazing. But look, I mean, they're going into this season with the running backs they've got. They've obviously got Josh Allen as well, who's a running threat. We want him to run less. This is the podcast preaching to Josh Allen, who I assume is watching, of course. Slide man. But in the interim, I think that James Cook is he's gonna be able to be their RB1. I think that's undoubtedly. But we might find that they're running a little bit less and trying to go a bit more through the passing game, even particularly on those like short yard downages. Maybe they do a bit more crosses, a bit more short yard throws, just to be able to account for that. Because you're right, he is a small fella.
A small fella.
Take it from one small fella to the next.
I don't think any of us are large fellas. I think we're all kind of somewhat in that category.
So I want to take shots where I can behind a computer screen, obviously. Yeah.
So, naturally. I mean, that's where we're all keyboard warriors here. Let's go ahead and jump into our main topic. So I mentioned at the top of the show on Monday, we did legit NFC. We took 2 minutes to break down every single NFC team. Adrian and myself, we brought on Kevin to do legit AFC. We're going to do the same thing. 16 teams, 3 of us. 2 of us will have 5 teams. 1 will have 6. We'll cover all of them. I hope Anthony is getting that timer ready because we will try to keep it nice and tight. Gentlemen, do you have a division you want to start with?
I'm good. I feel like that nice and tight comment was directly at me, and I've heard it, and I'm good with it. Like,
I didn't name any names. That's what the whistle is for.
One of the 2 people here, of course. Yeah, I'm good with whatever.
Let's start with the Super Bowl champion division of the AFC West.
Sure. Why don't I take it away with the Super Bowl champion fellas?
There we go.
All righty. So the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl winners, Super Bowl champions. We talked about these guys when we did our songs of the offseason, and the song that we assigned to them. Do you remember, Kevin?
Hanging Around, Counting Crows.
No, it was I think that was your song. My song was just the 2 of us.
By the way, real quick, love that as a segment. I listened to
so
that
fun.
That was so much fun. You guys are reading into my time. No, that was the song. The song we put was just the 2 of us because it just feels like when you got Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, you're going to be contending, and this year's no different. The reality is that if you look at their roster, with any other quarterback coach combo, it would seem staffed. They've got a solid interior offensive line. Donovan Smith is objectively a downgrade on the tackle. The wide receiver 1 is Kadarius Toney. Now, he can do that role, but he has to stay healthy. And that is, as always, every year we're talking about a receiver that needs to stay healthy. And if he doesn't, they're falling back to MVS. Their rookie, Rashee Rice, look, he's not too bad, but they don't have a true one, especially if Toney can't stay healthy. But I think because the way he delivered in the Super Bowl, they believe in him, and I understand that. Their defense is isn't complete, but it is decent. I would say that they've upgraded their pass rush. They brought in Charles Omenihu. That was a nice pickup from the 49ers. Their rookie, and I'm going to try and pronounce his Felix Anudike-Uzomah, also a good pickup. And then their cornerback room is quite nice, particularly because Steve Spags loves getting production from quarterbacks, and he's got L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie. They're great already, so I can expect some improvement there. Your thoughts, fellas?
Nailed that, Adrian.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Look at that. Nice
so
and
concise.
I'll say this. It didn't matter that the Chiefs didn't have a wide receiver 1 last year. As long as they have Travis Kelce, he's their wide receiver 1. So the other side of it in the wide receiver room, they seem like you mentioned, Kevin, throwing a dartboard at the Giants wide receivers. I think they're doing that in Kansas City too. Kadarius Toney. You've got Sky Moore, a lot of positives coming out in the second. I'm gonna try to name all the receivers. Got MVS. You've got now I lost it. Who else did they bring?
Rashee Rice.
Justin Ross. Right there.
Justin Watson.
There is a Watson there as well.
There's a Watson, right?
A whole bunch of guys that they're hoping to step up. Let's stay in the AFC West. I don't have the division in front of me. Who wants to go?
Well, really quick, I'll just say this because I do want to.
I think I have the other 2, and then Adrian.
I'm going to be quiet on this one. I'm just going to chime in really quick. Hanging around is in reference to where they stay. They just stay at the top. And also, I felt like just the 2 of us was disrespectful to Travis Kelce. So I actually proposed that we make it the 3 best friends that anyone could have from the Hangover film series.
Nice.
You did do that.
Yeah.
And it's also applicable to the gentleman on this podcast. I digress. Move on.
Nice. Let's go ahead. Let's move to the Raiders. Anthony, let's get that 2-minute going. All right. So Raiders finished at 6-11 last year. starting with the defense, 28th in DVOA from week 10 on. I always like to, rather than an entire season, I feel like teams kind of take a while to get gelled. So all the stats you're going to hear from me today are from week 10 on, at least in DVOA. 28th in total defense, and they didn't really address their defense. They did add Duke Shelley, who had a really nice year at cornerback in Minnesota. They added Chandler Jones, but guys, I don't know if you know this, Chandler Jones is 33, and he hasn't earned a PFF grade above 67 since 2019. And of course, they still have Max Crosby, but here's worse with the defense. Chandler Jones had a 63.8 PFF grade last year. That was the highest among all projected starters for the Raiders outside of Crosby and Shelley. This defense is an absolute problem. Let's go to the offense. O-line is the bottom third of the league, with Colton Miller being the only plus starter. But they do have some nice weapons. Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, now Hunter Renfrow. That's a pretty nice trio. Rookie tight end, Michael Mayer. We don't know what we're getting out of him yet. Jimmy Garoppolo might not even play for the team. He has a clause where it's possible they could completely get out of that contract. So I've got questions up and down the board. The defense was the reason they didn't make the playoffs. The offense was actually decent, and they didn't address it really at all. So I think this is another tough season in a very tough division in an insane conference for Josh McDaniels and the Raiders. I don't know that they'll get more than 6 wins this year.
Hot take. I mean, I'm excited to see Tyree Wilson opposite Max Crosby. I think that'll be a nice little pass rush, but I agree with you. They're going to have problems. I don't want to get into the Jimmy slander, but I'm sorry. My song for them was like, what do you mean? Because just like, what do you mean this is your team? And you know what? Josh McDaniels, be better. Be a better coach. That's all it is. I don't know how to tell you to do that, but just be better.
They need Tyree Wilson to be a stud right off the bat because they have all their cornerbacks are graded in the 50s outside of Shelley. All their linebackers are graded in the 50s. This defense, if it doesn't get pass rush, is going to be in an AFC West, they're going to get trounced.
Yeah, and I love the vibe check. That's a big thing for me. The vibes are bad in Vegas.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of good reports coming out. The Jimmy G stuff is just very head scratching. Like it's very clear that they knew he was a risk for this, this injury, this surgery, this yada yada, and it's like there's Brady rumors, and that's just we're at that point of the
Devontae Adams said he wasn't happy with
not
the
happy
organization. Josh Jacobs, I didn't even mention him, still hasn't signed his tag,
holding out. Reigning rushing champ.
Correct. Let's go ahead and move Adrian to the LA Chargers.
Alrighty, the Chargers. So I'm very torn about the Chargers coaching staff. So there are a few seats hotter in the NFL right now than Brandon Staley. He made some terrible decisions last year that he needs to clean up. But I talked about this, that they've got Kellen Moore now, and I think Kellen Moore is going to elevate their offense to a new level. So no more Joe Lombardi, no more dink and dunk. There's already reports that Moore's offense is just stretching the field, and they're making use of that cannon that Justin Herbert has. They held on to Eckler, despite a few little whispers of him maybe looking elsewhere because the running back market is what it is. But he's a red zone machine. I think he scored upwards of 30 touchdowns in the last 2 years.
40.
Yeah.
It's 2020, over 40.
Insane, right? So he's an absolute weapon. I'm really glad they held on to him. Their wideout group, obviously, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, it depends if they can stay healthy and both be on the field. But I do like their rookie, Quentin Johnson. He's a real vertical threat, and I feel like he's going to be able to stretch the field. Their line is actually super solid. I looked up the 5 of their line average PFF grade across the 5 of them of 70.28, which is impressive. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of weak spots on that line. The defense has some stars. So they've obviously got Joey Bosa, they've got Derwin James. Khalil Mack has dropped off. He's not the name that he used to be, but he still can produce. And I feel like they're going to be able to get that out of him. They've got a couple of look. If you look at the rest of them, there's a bunch of average starters. So J.C. Jackson's coming back from injury. Asante Samuel Jr. They've got Eric Kendricks and the Vikings, who they went through a period where Eric Kendricks was just everywhere on the field, but he's dropped off a little bit. So I do, though, believe, I'm kind of talking myself out of it, but I do believe that this is the year they make the leap. And I believe the reason for that is Kellen Moore. And I can't wait to see the Cowboys try and explain themselves. Why they sent him out the door, I can't understand it. That's my thoughts on the Chargers. I think they're going to make the leap this year.
I'll let Kevin go because I always go and then use up the rest of the timer.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a really well laid out argument, man. You know me, man. I'm like judge, jury, and executioner, man. I'm sitting here waiting on seeing what Justin Herbert does. That's the big thing I'm holding my breath for, because if he's the elite quarterback that I'm told that he is, we're going to see it this year. And if we don't, then I don't think he is. I think it's that simple.
My quick thoughts, love Kellen Moore. I think he's going to really open up that offense. And mentioning that offensive line, they got lucky. No, not lucky, but they've really done a great job drafting. 3 of their starters are either second or third year players. Rashawn Slater, who was a stud in the first round 2 seasons ago, tore his bicep, was out for the year. They put in Jamari Salyer, who was really, really good, and they're going to move him to guard. And they drafted Zion Johnson in the first round last year, who has been a really solid guard. So their offensive line is stout, Adrian. Shout out to Thomas, popped up in the chat. Member of our Legit Football family. Always great to see you. Let's finish up the AFC West with the Denver Broncos. Denver finished last season at 5-12 in the basement of the AFC after a lot of people predicted them to be just a bit higher. Rich Jodice, the Pro Football Demon, famously predicted them to be in the Super Bowl on this very show, or maybe it was the 30 Minutes show. Weapons are not an issue. You've got Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, KJ Hamler, Marvin Mims, great rookie draft pick. Greg Dulcich had a great year at tight end, and a decent O-line. But at the end of the day, guys, can Russ bounce back under Sean Payton? This is a guy who was on his way to a clear and steady Hall of Fame career, and then was one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL last year. On the running back position, Javonte Williams recovering from major surgery, but I like the Samaje Perine pickup. I think they can fill the gap in the meantime with him. Defense did underperform mainly due to the lack of pass rush. Bradley Chubb is now in Miami. Von Miller is now in Buffalo. You do have a really strong secondary with Pat Surtain and Justin Simmons. Linebacker core is solid with Alex Singleton and Jewel. Randy Gregory, their big acquisition last year, who was out, needs to be a huge factor and get that pass rush going if this defense wants to slow down the other teams in the AFC.
I think that Russell Wilson is going to have the year. You know what? It's funny. As we were looking into this topic, and I was thinking about the Broncos, I just remembered. Do you remember where we were 12 months ago when Russell Wilson was traded and everyone thought the Broncos were a lock for the Super Bowl, right? You talked about that. And the reason for that is he was a Hall of Fame. He still is probably a Hall of Fame quarterback, but he was on this trajectory that you don't normally see drop off a cliff this much. Absolutely can see regression. You can and I think maybe the Seahawks knew that was coming, but it's just crazy to see where he went to and from. So I really do think that Nathaniel Hackett played a big part of that. You can see he's determined. I mean, I don't buy into the workout video hypes, but you can see he's lost some weight. He's really getting into it. Like, I feel like he's going to come back, and I really do trust Sean Payton to do that.
Kevin, 2 cents?
Yeah, 2 cents. It's a wait and see thing. Sean Payton is the lone variable that makes me question my eye test, which was that they were objectively one of the worst teams I ever laid my eyes on. So Sean Payton is the kind of coach that can turn it around. So I'm going to hold my breath on that.
All right, let's go to the AFC North. We'll let Kevin do one. Why don't we hear about the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, the AFC North is actually mine. When I was picking my teams, I realized I just took the whole AFC North. But this team does
three of the 4. Adrian has the Bengals.
I poached him. I don't know why. This team does have some question marks, and I think this year will go a long way to answering them. I think the biggest of all of them is Kenny Pickett, right? You can like what you've seen. He does have first-round pedigree. He does have hands the size of like a dog's paws. So, those are pretty tiny little hands.
Kenny Two Gloves.
Kenny Two Gloves. But he's got some great weapons. Deontay Johnson's great. Najee Harris. I'm looking for a return to form this year. George Pickens likely continues his breakout. He was so dominant last year.
I'm high on Pickens. I think he has a big season.
He's a stud. I don't love Allen Robinson, but I think he's a better wide receiver.
As a wide receiver 3, though,
solid at this stage of his career. Pat Freiermuth is an elite tight end, absolutely. And the offensive line is solid.
And they added Darnell Washington, which is basically an extra offensive lineman, but I just love the situation. He doesn't have to be the tight end one there.
Yep, and I love Isaac Seumalo, great pickup. I think the defense and the coaching are the coup de grace of the team. Mike Tomlin still hasn't had a losing record. I don't know what kind of apocalyptic nonsense needs to happen for him to finally have a losing record, but it wasn't last year.
I'm convinced it won't happen if it didn't happen last year.
It doesn't seem likely, but TJ Watt is a perennial defensive player of the year candidate. Joey Porter Jr. and Patrick Peterson in the defensive backfield. Minka Fitzpatrick, one of the best safeties in the league. The defensive line is insane. Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton, Alex Highsmith. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The short of it all, I'm more out than in terms of like playoffs. I love the roster, but Pickett is a huge question mark. I'm more out than in terms of playoffs. But it wouldn't shock me in the slightest to see them be competitive in every game, be competitive when it comes to the playoffs, and it would shock me more if they weren't a winning team than if they were, but I don't know if that will translate to a playoff appearance.
Hey, Adrian, Kevin went over the whole 2 minutes just by himself, just so it's not just you.
You know,
Shame on you, Kevin.
I
How could you?
I spent the first 15 seconds making fun of myself for picking the North, but you know,
Well, it's your fault for the format you used.
that's true. That's true.
Maybe
We all
a
got
hot take.
excuses, man. We all got them.
Super early predictions. I'm going to say the Steelers finish second in the AFC North behind the Bengals.
Whoa.
Wow.
So, Adrian, any quick thoughts about Pittsburgh before we'll hear about Cincinnati from you?
The only thing I'll say is I think I'm with you that I don't know about playoffs, but only because they're in the AFC. In the NFC, I think they got the roster to make it.
I didn't say playoffs. I just said second in the AFC.
Sorry, to Kevin's point.
Oh, yeah. All right, Adrian, let's go to one of the powerhouses in the AFC, the Cincinnati Bengals.
Alrighty. So, Kevin, in our over-under episode, just referencing the past year, you talked about some potential regression in the Bengals. I think I see that happening. Not this year. I think this year it's full steam ahead. So we're going to, for the exercise, I'm going to assume they're going to extend Joe Burrow before the season starts. So they're going to be giving him the bag. He's going to reset the market. We can expect all of that. Jamar Chase is probably next, but I think that will probably be next off season. What they do have is some continuity in their skill position. So quarterback, running back, wide receivers have been the same for the last 3 years in a row. That's continuity you don't normally see in the NFL. Pardon me. So I'm excited to see that continues because they've always been an exciting offense to watch. They're objectively upgraded at tackle. Orlando Brown is their biggest upgrade. They've still got Jonah Williams. Lyle Collins was talk of being traded, but he's still there. So they've got some depth at tackle. And I think that's going to make the difference because Joe Burrow needs to be sacked less. At the end of the day, if I had one pitch for the Bengals, stop letting Joe Burrow get sacked. Like that's all you need to do. Their defense, which I think has been historically not amazing, is actually kind of above average now. Their weak spot is safety. They sent Jesse Bates out. That sucks. Von Bell's gone. They did draft Dax Hill, so he's going to have to step into that role straight away, and he's going to have to deliver. And I'm a big fan of their DC, Lou Anarumo.
I was going to mention him if you didn't.
Captain Lou.
So good.
Yeah,
Captain Lou.
He's one of those guys that just adapts to the offense. And I think that's what you need. You just need someone you don't want him static in, if it's not working, change it. The only thing I'll say, I think I'm coming up to time. Joe Burrow talked about the window being open for his entire career. And that's great when the window costs you $500, but when the window costs you $50,000, there's less money to spend on the rest of the house. So I think this is your year to make it happen if you can do that, because there's going to be money going out the door next year and the year after, there's cap casualties coming.
I love the construction analogy there. Kevin, any quick thoughts on the state of the Bengals?
Yeah, I have to do a lot of reflecting on my homerism. They did send my favorite team home. So, while I think a regression is possible because of how much money they're going to have tied up in their assets, I also don't think it's inevitable. I think that's a great point, Adrian. I think this year we have another year. Oh, Thomas, yeah. The secondary is probably the biggest concern, and those offenses in the AFC will make you pay if your secondary isn't A1. So, yeah, I think I'm in on the Bengals having a fantastic year this year. I don't know if I'm as in on them making the Super Bowl again or the AFC Championship, but I don't see them having a down year. I don't see it. They're too good.
For me, as long as they have Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, they absolutely have a chance to make the AFC Championship game again. All right, Kevin, let's go to Baltimore and hear about the Ravens.
Perfect. Baltimore Ravens. Lamar's back. Hopefully, he's in the best shape of his career. He's talking about throwing for 6,000 yards. He doesn't have the ankle weight of Greg Roman anymore. I'm stoked. Are these the best weapons Lamar has ever had? I like to think so. Bateman, OBJ, Flowers, Andrews, Isaiah Likely, healthy J.K. Dobbins, pretty solid offensive line.
J.K. Dobbins, who's currently sitting out, by the way. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah. But I think this offense has the chance to be extremely explosive. They're always stout on D. For some reason, Baltimore and Pittsburgh, they're the two teams you can always count on them having a stellar defense. I will say the pieces are a little more concerning than usual this year. They do have Pierce, who's stout on the line. Adafe Owe and David Ajabo, some solid linebacker, edge type players. Some of the best off-ball linebackers in the game with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. But outside of Kyle Hamilton, I'm a little suspect of the secondary, to be completely honest with you.
Marlon Humphrey's actually getting up there in age. Chuck
I
Clark
was thinking,
just tore his ACL, left for the Jets.
wasn't as elite last year as we're used to him being.
Yeah.
But they have Rock Yasin as CB2. I don't know about all that. Anyways, they still have some of the best special teams in the NFL. I think they have a rightful claim to challenge Cincinnati for the North. I don't think they're going to, at least in terms of like steal it. I think they'll contend. But I think that if they don't take a step forward this year, and I'm a Ravens fan, I would be very concerned. But I think they should be better this year than they were last year. Where they
My biggest question, and then we'll get your thoughts, Adrian, is what does Todd Monken's offense look like when we get to see Lamar Jackson with a different offense that he has worked with his entire time? He's always been with Greg Roman. Yeah, there's complaints, yada, yada, but Greg Roman led him to an MVP season. What does it look like under Todd Monken? Adrian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think though you're right. He led him to an MVP season, but then the offense stayed exactly the same. Teams worked them out, and then he said people calling the plays before the snap. So I don't know if you guys remember that. It was 2020. So it is interesting to see what the offense will be. I don't love the weapons. I'm not going to talk about a certain name because I've decided that I'm not going to mention him on this podcast anymore.
Proud of you.
Yeah.
Proud of you.
Is that an Odell Beckham slam?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
He is.
He's
I
a
said
hater.
we need the team of Why Won't You Die, and he is the captain of that team.
For the record, I'm closer to Adrian on that than maybe Kevin and the OBJ thing. I think it's been too long since we've seen him coming off major knee surgery, 30 years old. I don't think we're going to get the OBJ of old. Kevin, let's finish out.
Yeah, really quick. I just want to say, I don't want to come across as like I love OBJ. Like, I like him fine. I think he's never going to be the OBJ of old, but he helped the Rams a great deal. And I think we'll get 80% of that. Yeah, we'll get 80% of that OBJ, which will still be better than most of the receivers that Lamar's thrown to in his career.
We'll see. Can he even stay healthy? All right, finish up the AFC North, Kevin, with the Cleveland Browns.
The Browns are one of the most interesting teams in the league. Shockingly, very high potential for an offensive explosion this year as well. Again, the question mark is the quarterback, but weapons galore. Are you kidding me? Nick Chubb, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Njoku. Great offensive line. Watson's the question mark. The defense. And I ask this genuinely wholeheartedly. Do they have a single weakness on that defense? Because I don't see it. If they do, Dalvin Tomlinson, Myles Garrett, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Denzel Ward. They have great.
Zadarius Smith they added.
Zadarius Smith. They're great at every position. I think the question is going to be, can Watson elevate them in the North? Is Kevin Stefanski still the former coach of the year prospect that we thought he was? Is he that guy? And do they have the stones to compete with? They're going to have to play the Bengals twice. They're going to have to play the Steelers twice. They're going to have to play the Ravens twice. That's 6 tough games. I think they have to play Buffalo again, if I'm correct. They'll probably have to play most of the contenders in the AFC. And, again, Watson was one of the worst QBs in the league last year in his limited amount of time. So if he doesn't take a material step forward towards the Deshaun Watson of Houston, I think we're looking at a 7-win team. But like I said, weapons galore and literally a defense that does not have any holes.
I think you nailed this, Kevin. I like the Watson question mark is probably the biggest one in football at the moment. His season defines whether this is the worst trade in history, and I mean that the worst trade in history, or if the Browns return to relevancy, because really they've been irrelevant for the most part. I know they made a playoff and they got a playoff win, but they've been a bit of a punching bag in the North for a long, long time. If Watson is 70% of what he was with that loaded roster, they are legit contenders.
One point, because I'm completely aligned with you guys on this. Watson had a 55 PFF grade last year that was good for 35th out of 39 graded quarterbacks in the NFL. It all comes down to how he plays and whether this Browns team sees success.
What a roster, though.
Oh, the rest of the roster is stacked.
What a roster.
It literally, I think that's why we're so aligned. The only question we have is, outside of injuries, which you can't predict, what kind of Watson are we getting here? All right, let's jump to the AFC South. I will kick it off with the Tennessee Titans. 7-10 last year, but here's the kicker, guys. They started 7-3. They lost their last 7. Biggest weakness, they've got weaknesses all across their roster, but the biggest weakness is their starting O-line. It finished last year, according to PFF, as the worst offensive line in the NFL. They're starting this year, projected to be, guess what? The worst offensive line in the NFL. So bad, I'm going to read you the starters here, guys. Left tackle, projected starters, Andre Dillard. He was a backup in Philly last year. Left guard, Peter Skoronski. First-round rookie. That's probably the most promising thing on this list. Center, Aaron Brewer, who did play over 900 snaps at guard last year, moving to a new position. Right guard Daniel Brunskill, who we played for the 49ers, PFF grade of 69. That's decent for this offensive line. Yeah, they got to take it. Right tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere, 52.3 PFF grade in his rookie season. This offensive line has holes up and down the roster. Big question marks at wide receiver. Their current wide receiver group, Treylon Burks, Nick Westbrook-Akine, and Kyle Phillips. Now, look, Burks could make a jump. Westbrook-Akine shined in moments. Kyle Phillips going into year 2, but that's nobody's idea of a scary wide receiver group. Derrick Henry, he's turning 30 this season, guys, and he might have still been very productive last year, but at some point, 350 carries a year is going to wear down a guy even as amazing as King Henry is. The defense, which is usually a strength under Mike Vrabel, 25th in DVOA over the final 9 weeks. Like I said, problems all across the board. And of course, you go to question mark. The biggest question mark, maybe at quarterback, Ryan Tannehill coming off an injury-plagued season. They drafted Will Levis. A lot of question marks about how good he could be. It's going to be a rough season for Titans fans.
Yeah, I think, look, there was talk of this being a teardown year and shipping Tannehill and Henry out. I personally have the opinion you should have done that. Take the pain now. But look, they're rolling the dice one more time. They could still. I don't think they will. They could still get rid of Tannehill. But it seems like Will Levis isn't performing. So, yeah, it's a weird one for the Titans. I feel for you.
Yeah, I think they're on the decline. Unfortunately, if I'm Vrabel, I think the sooner the better. Ripping the Band-Aid off, I think that's just it's time, in my opinion. But I do respect, you have Derrick Henry, one of the best running backs in NFL history. Tannehill's been great for them. I mean, I do respect their maybe like a last dance type situation, but it feels like kind of a pathetic last dance compared to, like, say, Brady or like the Kobe farewell tour. Like, we're looking at Ryan Tannehill. It's not exactly inspiring, in my opinion, but
it's a last dance, but it's like a square dance or something weird and not fun. Like, that's
literally
like a hoedown, like a crazy line dance. And it doesn't help that I think as we get into these teams, we'll find that probably every team in this division, at least on paper, got better, and the Titans didn't. So let's go ahead and talk about the team who's presumed to win this division, who won this division a year ago and won a playoff game. Adrian, let's hear about the Jacksonville Jaguars.
All right. I of all the teams in the AFC that I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, the Jags are probably the top of that list. I'm going to talk about some things I've talked about, but I can't help it because I'm excited. So the Jags are very similar as far as their roster is to 2022. They have made some changes. Trevor Lawrence, we've talked about him in Legit Football headlines. He is an MVP candidate this year, and there's a lot of hype about that. I think realistically, this is his second year. You have to mulligan his rookie year with Urban Meyer. They're bringing Calvin Ridley back. So excited to see Calvin Ridley. I can't wait to see him deliver on what he's promised. Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, they got a great production out of them. I think Kirk is still considered the number one, but if you want my opinion, Ridley is taking that spot. Travis Etienne Jr., he's shown is a solid running back, but he has some weaknesses. Tank Bigsby's been getting some good hype in camp, and I think they're going to be a nice little 1-2 punch. Their 2022 first pick, Trayvon Walker, needs to be better. That pass rush was not good enough, and that needs to improve. I think Mike Colwell needs to have a bit of a consistent defense because they got better over the year, but he needs to do that out the gate. I do love Tyson Campbell, their cornerback. He had an 82 PFF in the secondary. He's someone to watch out for this year. I think their division isn't great. You're right. They're favored to win it. But I think the offense is going to carry them, I think, with those weapons around them and with Trevor Lawrence, because I do see him as like a next Mahomes. That's how high a regard I hold him. I see him as a next Mahomes. I think they're going to really do some damage this year, and I think they're going to take this division quite easily. But I think we'll be talking about them in a different light come January next year.
Yeah, I think the biggest question is on the defensive side of the ball. 19th in DVOA and defense from week 10 on last year. Not the worst out there, but their offense was a top 10 offense, and I think it's only going to get better, especially if Ridley can still play the guitar. Kevin, any quick thoughts on the Jags?
Yeah, man, my favorite nickname of all time, and I don't even know if it's like official or if we just say it on the show, but I call Trevor Lawrence the Prince who was promised. And I feel like he's going to show it this year. He's definitely an MVP candidate.
It plays.
It plays, right? It plays. Yeah. But I love Adrian's Calvin Ridley love. It's inspired me to jump on the Calvin Ridley bandwagon.
Yes.
Big time. And I love ETN. So, yeah, the offense is huge. Defense is the question mark. Absolutely. That's a no-brainer.
Kevin, I know you're excited to talk about this team. Let's hear about the Houston Texans.
I just couldn't imagine anybody else talking about them for 2 minutes. The obvious pillars are the new head coach, the new quarterback, and their premier edge rusher that they just drafted. All new pieces, which is very exciting, very hopeful. DeMeco Ryans was coveted. He spurned Denver to choose his Houston Texans where he played. They had a quality spending spree in free agency. Devin Singletary, Motor, Dalton Schultz, and they're still quietly in the running for DeAndre Hopkins. They brought in Case Keenum to solidify the backup quarterback position and hopefully lend some assistance to CJ Stroud. You're looking at a team that was also sneaky good last year in a year where they secured the second overall pick. They took KC to overtime. They won games that they shouldn't have won, which was part of what cost them the first overall pick. I think the defense could be actually good. I mean, Malik Davis, Sheldon Rankins, Jerry Hughes, Chase Winovich, Will Anderson on the defensive line. That's a pretty solid defensive line. John Mechie should be healthy, returning from his cancer, which is a huge story. Nico Collins is a huge breakout candidate. Bobby Trees, now wide receiver 3, doesn't have to be a wide receiver 1. That's where he is best suited. Their offensive line is better with Shaq Mason coming in. Laramie Tunsil's one of the best.
I love Tank Dell.
Your boy, you do love Tank Dell. Yeah. Laramie's one of the best tackles in the world. This team is not a shoe-in for a top 5 pick like people think they are. I think they're going to shock a lot of people, and I don't think they'll get there. I'm picturing more of like a 6-11, 7-10 type season, but I don't see them getting a top 5 pick. I feel strongly about that.
Adrian, their defense actually was 11th in defensive DVOA in the second half of the season last year. I think that went a little bit under the radar. And by the way, DeMeco Ryans is now the head coach, and we all know what he did with the San Francisco D.
Yeah, that shocks me. That definitely went under the radar. We're expecting the defense to take a leap. I feel bad talking over the timer because a bit of self-love. I feel like I've been nailing the time on my ones, but that's okay. I'll keep going for a second.
He had to mention, Kevin, by the way, I've been
nailing the time. Yeah, right?
I'm not talking to anyone in specific, just one person who may have mentioned me at the start. No. So
I fired the first shot. It's all good.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm excited to see the Texans this year as well. It's again, similar to the Browns. I want to return to relevancy. I like good football. I don't like watching boring teams. So I'm excited to see what they do this year.
Armand mentioned in the chat, he predicted 8-9 for the Texans. That would be a phenomenal season for Houston this year if they finish 8-9.
And I think it's possible. Thomas, I think this year, that's such a tough call. Am I crazy for wanting to say Pickett?
I'd rather have the promise of Pickett than
awful.
No, I'd rather have the promise of Pickett personally than what I saw from Watson last year.
What if they're on the same contract though? What if you had them on the same contract? That's because that's
going to pay Kenny Pickett $230 million.
No. Other way around. So that's for me. For me, the catch with Watson is like there's so much money versus Pickett. Yeah, that's true. But
I still don't know.
So to me, it's Pickett.
How long
for that
can they
reason.
keep this solid roster together when they're paying that much guaranteed money and therefore dead cap space?
Yeah.
Let's finish off. Adrian,
No. Go.
All right, keep it rolling. Let's finish off the AFC South with the Indianapolis Colts. 4-12 a season ago. Also, like the Titans, lost their last 7 straight. Worst offense in the entire NFL by DVOA from week 10 on. But they added Anthony Richardson as their quarterback of the future. Isaiah McKenzie, Kevin's boy out of Buffalo. Josh Downs, guy I'm very high on. And head coach Shane Steichen, who just helped lead the Eagles to the Super Bowl and make Jalen Hurts an MVP candidate. They also have second-year up-and-coming talents, Alec Pierce and Jelani Woods. So there's a lot to like about the weapons here. Offensive line, good on paper. They used to be one of the top 5 offensive lines in the NFL, and they haven't changed that much, but they need to have a bounce-back season. They were actually pretty bad last year. Jonathan Taylor on pace to bounce back after an injury-plagued season. He was still good when he was healthy. Kevin highlighted him as one of his top 5 running backs in the NFL. Defense still an issue, 21st in DVOA. They did lose Stephon Gilmore. And current top cornerback, Isaiah Rodgers. You guys might know that name is the one who's being investigated for betting on a lot of games, including betting on Colts games. So I think there's a pretty good shot that he won't be playing. So suddenly that secondary is a question mark. Darius Shaq Leonard is an amazing talent, but he's really had trouble staying healthy. They still have some pieces on the defensive line, but there's a lot of question marks in a tough AFC. I think they'll be better than 4-12. I think that's pretty easy to say, but I don't see them sniffing playoffs. I think if you have Anthony Richardson showing progress, that's a win for Indy.
And I really can see Jonathan Taylor bouncing back this year. He was, in 2021, that season was just like bonkers dominant. You got Shane Steichen come in now. He knows how to maximize a running back. He can make. I'm going to make Miles Sanders hate. He can make him look elite. So Jonathan Taylor, sorry, man. I'm sorry, Kevin.
I love Miles Sanders. That's the other thing I wanted to yell at you guys about.
It hurts me to hurt you. It really does. But
we'll find out this year playing behind Carolina instead of that Eagles offensive line. We'll find out
like him.
Miles Sanders. All right, let's jump to the AFC East. Kevin, I know we're both very excited to talk about this, but I'm going to let Adrian kick it off with the team of the offseason. And most likely, in my opinion, the team of hard knocks, that's the New York Jets.
All right. The New York Football Jets. New Jersey Jets, New York Football Jets. All right. So the question here is Aaron Rodgers. Is he Aaron Rodgers? And I think he's going to be. I think that you can expect maybe he might drop off from his MVP season, but I expect an improvement from last year because he's got a better cast around him. They went and got some tackle insurance in case Mekhi Becton goes down. That's a good move because you do need to protect Rodgers. He doesn't have the mobility he once had. Breece Hall was Rookie of the Year candidate before his ACL. That's another big question mark. Is he going to come back and deliver the way that he was? I don't know about bringing in McCall Hardman. Like they're weird in their receiver room because they've got a lot of threes. Alan Lazard is a good receiver, but he's not elite. McCall Hardman is not elite.
Corey Davis is still there.
Yeah, he's number 2, but I don't know if I consider him elite. But then they've got Garrett Wilson. So I do understand that. I feel like they've got much more weapons than Rodgers is used to. CJ Uzomah, Tyler Conklin, they'll get some work. I think Aaron Rodgers loves a good tight end. What we really are kind of looking at here is Salah to come in and bring the defense again because he improved that defense dramatically last year. They've got Sauce Gardner. He is the best quarterback in the league. Like he's number 1 to me. He can lock people down, and they should get Quinn Williams' contract done. I think that's not going to be a problem. So all they needed last year was just competent quarterback play. They're getting Aaron Rodgers. They're in a rough division, but realistically, it's Super Bowl or bust for them. And I'm glad you mentioned Hard Knocks because I've reserved my last 20 seconds to plea Roger Goodell, force the Jets to do Hard Knocks. I know they don't want to. I understand, but we need it. I'm going to misquote Les Grossman from the 2008 comedy Juggernaut Tropic Thunder. Now you handle a football team. They whine about anything. You pull down their pants and spank their bottom. I clean that up a little bit. Make them do Hard Knocks. We need to see this.
I think it will happen. I think everybody knows that the Jets are the team that everybody wants to see. My biggest question with the Jets is not Rodgers from a physical standpoint. I think he'll be fine because we didn't really see any physical drop-off. It was more like, holding the ball too long, decision-making, that kind of stuff.
Mental. Yeah, he was checked out.
But Nathaniel Hackett is the offensive coordinator. We can't forget that, right? An offense that showed promise with Mike LaFleur calling plays. Well, he went to LA. Nathaniel Hackett is not going to be calling these plays. Not really. He's going to hand the keys to Rodgers. Can Rodgers really run an offense by himself? That is a question mark. And by the way, I think the defense will be fantastic. They were great last year. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. But it's the Rodgers, Hackett, the play calling in a very tough division I wonder about. And by the way, a guy to keep an eye on, tight end Jeremy Ruckert going into his second year. I was high on him coming out of Ohio State. A lot of good things coming out from camp.
Well, and Hacker was there for his MVP seasons. Like he's a good coordinator. I know it doesn't translate.
He was not
head
the
coach.
OC. He was not the OC in Green Bay. He was
Am I remembering incorrectly? I'm sure he was I could be wrong on that.
He was an
I
OC
thought he
at
was
one
OC.
point.
I mean,
don't
he's
know
a
if it
Packers
was-
fan, so maybe he would know. But
I'm sure he was the OC. Yeah,
but he wasn't
Yeah,
calling plays. LaFleur always called plays.
that's true. I do accept that. But look,
He
realistically,
was
Rodgers,
offensive coordinator for the Jacksonville team in the Blake Bortles days, and that's not a good thing. But I'm just pointing that out.
very, very fair call.
He was
Very
offense coordinator for the Bills, and he sucked. He was the worst one I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Nate Hackett. Yeah, I think he's trash, personally.
All right. Well,
Sorry, that was so
no,
mean.
That's
That
fine.
was
Armand,
Right.
we
It's
apologize.
not on my team anymore.
That was
It's
so
Hackett.
unbuttoned.
It's not. I mean, the Jets. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
it's Super Bowl or bust. I think it needs to be a playoff run. I think it needs to be
AFC
at least
Championship
sniffing the
appearance.
AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
We've got 3 AFC East teams to talk about left. I'm going to start with the Patriots so that Kevin and I can finish with our favorite
Love that.
teams.
Love that.
New England Patriots 8-9 last year with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge having some sort of weird distribution of offensive play calling. Well, now they have Bill O'Brien. He is back in New England as the new OC and play caller. Their defense, I mentioned earlier in the show, was top 5 by DVOA over the last 9 weeks of the season. Mac Jones and the playmakers are a question mark. Like, what Mac Jones are we going to get? Was it really a product of the fact that a defensive coach was calling their offensive plays and it was just stale? Or has Mac Jones, we've already kind of seen the best that he's going to give. Big fan of Ramondre Stevenson. I mentioned him, I think, multiple times on previous shows. I think he's primed for a huge season, especially with Bill O'Brien calling plays. If you look back to his time in Houston, he was 6th. And from 2014 to 2020, the Texans were in carries per game. So Stevenson will have his opportunities. Wide receivers, Devontae Parker and Kendrick Bourne are the top 2 wide receivers. Throw Juju in there, as kind of manning the slot. Doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Maybe you'll see a lot of 2 tight end sets with Gesicki and Henry, but the biggest question mark here is they're playing in an absolutely juggernaut of a division. Forget the rest of the conference. It's going to be tough to imagine New England making the playoffs.
Very much so. I actually, funnily enough, I do think that Mac Jones has a lot of promise. I think his rookie season showed it. I understand that, like, sometimes it's hard to just blame the coaching, but I looked at Urban Meyer, potentially Nathaniel Hackett. Like, it makes a difference. You give him Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. Like, what were you thinking, Bill? What were you thinking? But I'm glad he's brought in another Bill into the building. But I think we're going to see an improvement. My dad jokes are coming in strong.
They really are.
I think we're going to see an improvement in that room. And I think Mac Jones is, hopefully we see what we saw from his rookie season and an improvement. Because that was good. I mean, he was objectively the best rookie in his rookie season.
We love the dad humor there. That was solid. Practicing, no doubt.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to New England, I just think it's going to be a schlag. And I think, Adrian, you did have Mac Jones as one of your worst 5 QBs in the league, right?
But if you remember, I did blame the coaching for that. I was irrespective.
I'm just saying.
At his current point then, it was because of the coaching that was around him. I think he talked about in OTAs that things feel normal. When you're saying that, like, what were you used to? What happened last year that this feels normal just to have a regular coach?
I think he's going to be a great backup in a couple of years. I really do think he's going to be one of the best backups in the league. I'm looking forward to it.
And he could have, that could be his ceiling.
You heard it here first. Kevin, let's go to your Buffalo Bills before closing it out with my Dolphins.
All right, I'm going to start really granular, and I'm going to get holistic as we go on. I love the additions to the offensive line, Connor McGovern and Osiris Torrance. I love the addition of Dalton Kincaid. I love the signing of Deontay Hardy and Trent Sherfield. I love the bolstered pass rush. The question marks to me come from who's going to replace Tremaine Edmonds. There's basically a hole starting next to Matt Milano. The clubhouse favorite is long-tenured backup Terrell Dodson, who is like a sleeper type player to me. Like, he's been a backup for a couple of years, but he's not exactly inspiring confidence. He's had a couple starts, was a little shaky. There's been 2 third-round picks at the linebacker position the last 2 years, Dorian Williams and Terrell Bernard. I don't know why they're not the front runners. They don't match the physical prototype that Tremaine Edmonds had. They're kind of more of the Milano, undersized, will type players. But I also think CB2 is a question mark. I do like Khair Elam. I do think he had a pretty solid stretch last year when he was on the field. But the Bills babied him. They kind of brought him along really slowly.
Elam
and I never
had a
really
pick in the playoffs, right?
Yeah. He had a lot of pick. He was very effective on the field, but they did a lot to keep him off the field, which I did not love. It's time for an honest conversation. Do I love Josh Allen? Yes. Do I love Stephon Diggs? Yes. Do I love organizational strife? No. Do I think it's anywhere near as big of a deal as it's being made out to be in the media? No. Do I think it's nothing? No. There you go. There's a lot there. Moral of the story, they have inarguably a top 3 quarterback, a top 10 head coach. I would personally have him higher, but he's inarguably top 10, a top 5 GM, a top 3 roster, top to bottom, and they deserve respect and grace as much as they do criticism. I was very happy when the Bills announced the extension of Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, because organizational stability is worth its weight in gold, and I don't want any whispers of hot seat for those two at all, despite how badly Bills Twitter wants both of their heads on a stake. That is my piece, friends. Thank you.
Timing. I'm glad you
There you
mentioned
go.
the extension. We talked about Bills Twitter getting on with the Brandon Bean and Sean McDermott. Like miss us with that. They are good management, and you keep good management in the building.
The only thing I'll say about the Bills is I think some people might think it was a slight drop last season from the season before, but they were still finished number 2 DVOA overall, number 10 in defensive DVOA. A lot of people, had questions about their defense, and number 4 in offense with a not 100% Josh Allen. So they're going to be right back up there. They're one of the best teams in the NFL, and they will be again, unless the Stephon Diggs things take a turn. That's the kind of thing that could really hurt this. And Kevin, they need to find a pass rush, not for the regular season, but to get to the top of the mountain in the AFC. All right, let's
healthy
finish
Von
off.
Miller helps, and Leonard Floyd helps. I'm just gonna say, that's my piece. I like the Leonard Floyd addition a lot.
He's a great rotational piece, and he's very good at mopping up sacks that other players have
Big time
set up for him. Which
you need him. Yeah, you need that.
My Miami Dolphins, to finish off our team breakdowns, 9-8 a year ago, did make the playoffs with Skylar Thompson somehow almost knocked off the Bills in the playoffs. But here's who they added. Jalen Ramsey on defense, just on defense. Jalen Ramsey, we all, enough said about him. David Long, solid linebacker. You talk about how the Titans just got worse. David Long was one of their best defensive players. He's now the starting off-ball linebacker for the Dolphins. Deshaun Elliott to go next to Jaron Holland in the secondary. Highly rated, nice, solid starting safety. By the way, Vic Fangio, the defensive legend is calling the plays for this team. A team who, by the way, defensive DVOA was 11th to finish the season last year. So this was a team that got really hot on defense, only added very, very high caliber players, including Ramsey, and added one of the best defensive minds of the current NFL. Biggest questions, obviously, are 2 things. Tua's health more than anything else, and the offensive line is still a question mark. The Shanahan offense that Mike McDaniels run does tend to relieve pressure on offensive lines because it's meant to get the ball out quickly. It doesn't ask them to do too much, but they have to stay healthy. Teron Armstead has to stay healthy. They did have Connor Williams, had a great year at center. I really like they picked up former first-round pick offensive tackle Isaiah Wynn in free agency after he was released by the Patriots. So they do have some tackle depth in case they do lose Armstead. They get richer with speed. They added Devon Achane, the fastest running back in the NFL, in the 3rd round. And they added an extra cornerback into a room that is very, very deep in the 2nd round. So I'm excited. As long as Tua stays healthy, I think the Dolphins honestly have one of the best rosters in the NFL, and I'm not saying that as a homer.
I'm with you. You know what sucks a little bit is that Tua, I was a Tua hater until last year. He's undoubtedly a quality quarterback.
I agree.
It's the availability, and it sucks because you're right that Shanahan offense doesn't ask a lot, and then you put a quarterback with the skills, the accuracy of Tua. It would be a monster if he could just stay on the field for 17 games. And I've said it twice now. I like good football. I mean, I would love to see that. But I don't want to burst your bubble. I just don't see it. I don't see Tua staying healthy. You can go to all the judo lessons and learn how to fall all you want. Unfortunately, your body has a limit, and if your limit can't hold up to the NFL, well,
it's going to be very hard when we do season predictions for me to predict the Dolphins, and it's not because I'm a fan. It's because how do you predict if he's going to stay healthy or not? You have to make you can't predict that. You cannot predict injuries, even if you think it's going to happen. So I'm going to probably have to put them pretty high up just based on their talent alone and their coaching. Everything on paper looks like maybe a top 5 roster in the entire league. So I'll probably have to put them up high, even though, Adrian, I'm with you. I'm very scared of his injury. I will say this before, Kevin, you give your thoughts. The backup quarterback situation is better with Mike White there. Now, you might say, Mike White, who cares about Mike White? But Mike White was very efficient in the Jets offense last year, run by Mike LaFleur, who ran the Shanahan offense. So Mike White, much better than Teddy Bridgewater to run this style of offense. I'm not saying it's going to make us a contender, but it makes me feel at least a little bit better knowing he's the backup.
Yeah, I like Mike White as the backup. That was a sneaky under the radar signing. As far as your Dolphins take, Brian, you didn't say anything blasphemous. You didn't say anything homery. I think we both did a pretty good job keeping our analyst caps on for our spiels. I think Miami is undoubtedly one of the most talented rosters in the league. And I think with a healthy Tua, they will absolutely go 7 rounds, 10 rounds, however many. I'm not a big fighting guy. 10 rounds? What's the longest rounds?
I don't watch boxing.
They'd go 10 rounds with
12,
Buffalo.
12 rounds, 10 rounds.
No,
sure.
no boxing
rounds.
fans. 86 rounds. Doesn't matter.
86 rounds. 86
They
rounds.
definitely would go 86 rounds with Buffalo with a healthy Tua. And yeah, you can't definitively say that he won't be healthy, but I think the scare is for me even more than his literal health, which is obviously paramount, is how people would respond to how his health looks.
Oh, if he gets another concussion, I think he's done.
The
Like,
Dolphins
done
are under
in the league.
a different kind of pressure than the rest of the league, and specifically when it comes to Tua. So
I think doctors will tell him. I don't even think it's pressure from the outside. I think physical or medical professionals will tell him, hey, if this happens again, your playing career is done.
And it's just so tragic that I said it at the start of the show with the Tyreek Hill stuff, and I'll say it with this. Anything non-football related that would derail the kind of team that they have and what they've been building would just suck. That would just, even me as a hater of the Dolphins, I would hate that. That would kill me.
We all want everybody to be healthy and at their best, and then for the team that ends up at the top to do it not because of injuries. But we know that's not how the NFL works. That wraps up our team breakdowns at this point, halfway, almost exactly through the offseason. Training camps starting at the end of July, OTAs, mini camps, and the draft and free agency in the rear view. We've gone through legit NFC and legit AFC. I feel like we did a pretty accurate job of breaking down all 32 teams and giving everyone an idea of where they stand now. Now, when training camp comes and the news we get, it could change, whether there's injuries or breakout players, of course. But yeah, I feel pretty good about our breakdown, guys. What about you?
That was awesome. That was so fun. Yeah, I listened to the pod and I missed it so much. I was heartbroken not to have been here.
Missed a whole episode, and Kevin's like, "I'll pod from midnight in France or 1 a.m. where it is now." That is a true champion. Thank you to everybody who hung out. Multiple people in the chat. Armand, our number one fan, as always. Thank you, Adrian, on a Sunday all the way from Australia. Kevin on a Sunday all the way from France. We're all over the globe right now. Thank you to Anthony Wayner behind the scenes, as always, our producer. I'm Brian McFadden. It's been a pleasure coming back to host the Legit Football Pod for this week. Next week, back to this man, Kevin, running the show. This is the Legit Football NFL Podcast. We'll see you next time, guys.